maybe we're going to be talking about the Buddhist numbers in a maybe more of a light, a little more fun way than I think they're often represented, but not with disregard, of course, or a disrespect for the deep teachings that come along with those number lists. And so the number lists began because it was an oral tradition. And so in an oral tradition, you try to say things, I think, in a few ways. One is repetitively, right, over and over and over and over. And then it goes on to the other, and they repeat it over and over and over and over. So repetitively being a key there. Also then, not only repetitively, but simply, or in a way that's consistent with some archetype or architecture that we're already familiar with. And so numbers would be an easy one to follow. And so there's numbers. So the Buddhists, as I understood them, particularly certain the Buddhists that came from India, which of course is where Buddhism originated, they liked big numbers. And so, I mean, big numbers. They were essentially, by the way, I don't know who might know this or not about the history of Buddhism, but Buddhists were mathematicians frequently. They were enamored by numbers. They were enamored by measurement. They were science folks. And you can see that then, of course, in the teachings and now in the writings. They were science folk. And so they liked everything to be made based on observation, based on what was real and true, not what was prone to subjectivity. And of course, we know that the Buddha himself is now considered to be the first neuroscientist. And that's not by my account, that's really by the account of current neuroscience. So because of those factors, numbers, counting, measurement, objectivity, only that which can be clearly seen, and then maybe even we could add the dynamic of that which is universal, can be seen by all, not my eyes seeing one thing, your eyes seeing another. And then in fact, he went so far as to say anything else but that which can be understood universally is some kind of personal include. You see it that way because of your conditioning. You're seeing it that way because of your history. You see it that way because of your mind, your qualities of mind, right? You get this idea. So he makes a pretty strong distinction early on between that which we perceive and that which is universal or known. And the Buddha always leaned very strongly to the universal, that which all beings can know, all beings can manifest, all beings can achieve. And so those were the bases upon which this then called religion, I think it's a funny word, actually, though it did become then a religion as it moved to different areas, Japan, and then China, of course, where it went first, Tibet, very much, then started to take on a more subjective aspect. And actually, as I understand it from the teachers that I hear now, it wasn't that that was a problem. It was that it was not wholly universal any longer. Japan did its thing. China Chan did their thing. Japan then did Zen, right? Tibet then cultivated the Mahayana school. It wasn't that the Buddha said this is a problem. He just said, just keep in mind it's limited. it's limited by that tradition, those peoples, their culture, and he was not offended, by the way, by their bringing their own culture to these teachings. He just said, keep in mind, this is not the universal teaching that I am talking about achieving. And the universal reality that then invites and allows, I think, what we would call total freedom. Do you get this idea? How any adjustments, any limited view, anything would ultimately construct something that may be not always workable, not always true, right? Not always applicable. And from the Buddhist perspective, by the way, that was understood to be the cause of suffering. The minute you've got some variance on me, my way, my view, the way I see it, right? You are going to now construct what? The other. The other view, the other person, their perspective. And then what the Buddha understood so well, and we of course now see this in all of the conflicts and wars, is that there would be threat. And with that threat, there would be aggression. With that aggression, there would be harm. Make sense? Now, how many discussions have you all been in then, where a difference of perspective contributed to some kind of difficulty? Isn't it true? I see blue, you see blue, green. Just that. And then the intense, I think at times, grab that we all do, including me, for reality. No, it's like this. No, it's like this. No, it's this way. No, this is the right way. This is correct, right? Consequently, what we understand by that is that once we have constructed a solid self, the self itself will not be able to tolerate what now looks like a challenge. Do you know this? You do, as I do. It was this way, not that way. What do you mean? I saw it this way. I said this, not that. What do you mean? No, you didn't. You said the other thing. Right? This is right. This is good. This is best. And inherently, in all of this side taking, view establishing, the understanding is that there would be suffering. So then there was the construction of all these lists. And again, the number the actual number that I know, as we're going to be talking about numbers over the summer, the number that I'm most familiar with might be like the highest number might be something like 108, probably. 108 are the number of malas, beads, in a mala bracelet, as example, and has many other meanings. And all the way down then from 108, and we'll play with them as we go about this summer, all the way down to 0. All the way down to 0. And we'll talk about all of those. Today I picked the number 3. Anybody have any ideas about the number 3? What that might represent? By the way, 3 is also very important in the Christian tradition.
Compassion.
What does it mean, Dennis?
Compassion.
Compassion. Well, there are 3 things that these teachings say are most important to sustaining our meditation practice, our path to freedom, and our right view. 3 things. Any ideas on it? I'll look in chat here, see if anybody's got any. Yes, Chris, in Christianity, it was the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. I'm guessing in every tradition, right, that there is some set of numbers that are also important. But of course, in the Christian tradition, it was the Trinity itself. 3, very big number. That's a very big number. Tanya says it's a magic number. Schoolhouse Rock's number. Yes, 3 is actually understood to be an important number in many traditions. Any ideas about why? I'm having trouble finding my time, so I want to watch this because we're going to sit too.
714.
Thank you. I'll ask this one question before we sit silently. Any ideas why the number 3, not the number 1 or 2? What would it be about the number 3 that might, as Tanya says, make it a magic number? Chris says rightly, it was the essential number of the Trinity in the Christian tradition, and probably one of the most important, if not the most important numbers in the Buddhist tradition. We're going to talk about that today. Any ideas? Since it's already 7:14, why don't you hang on to that a little bit?
Yeah.
We'll let the 15-minute silence sitting, and then I'll go on to do a little teaching in the practice about what is it about the number 3 that makes it important across traditions, not just in this one. I'm going to, Carrie, need you, if you would. We're going to stop the recording now. Will you be here, Carrie, to be able to turn it back on at about 7:32?
Yep.
Could you do that? And then that'll tickle me that it's that time.
Sure.
Okay,
Sure.
that would be wonderful. And so as we sit, we consider the number 3. And we could imagine this maybe even as a relationship. First, the relationship to oneself. And that relationship would be based on genuine care, regard, with the sense of value, appreciation, and not a clinging kind of care, but a well-being. And that all of this care was committed to the capacity to know the truth, unadulterated by preference or bias, to know oneself and one's capacity for clear seeing, for open-heartedness. And then in the exercising of those qualities, these essential human qualities, this capacity to know, we would begin to cultivate the capacity to care and to know not only oneself, but another. And in this now dyad of two, we would then see both what is unique to the individual and then that which is universal in the perceived other. And we would then be able to utilize that other on the path to the truth, on the path to freedom. We could see then what is more universal as a human truth versus what is unique. And based on that science, that relational science, we would then grow even larger in our both understanding of the human condition and our understanding of the human heart and mind, and grow larger our capacity to love. Now, not just oneself with regard, but this other, this second one, beyond even in moments care for oneself. That the care could be so large, that the heart mind could be so committed that it would invest the whole of one's human life in this care of not only oneself, but another. Growing greater qualities of our human capacity. And then there would be out of that care, out of that commitment, not only to oneself, but to another, then growth beyond, healing beyond, capacities of heart and mind beyond that engagement in a dyad with another, would come the capacity to care beyond attachment, beyond even our familial love, beyond our partnering love, you could even say, into the love of others. And that we could cultivate this capacity into the love of the third, which would then come to represent all beings, all others. Beyond tribe, beyond family, beyond partnering. That this love, this knowing, this wisdom, and the actions that we would take would no longer be based on preference and attachment. That they would be for the good of the greater. One might think of that initially as a child, and the reality that we put all of our own needs aside in the care, in the attending, in the well-being of this other, this child. And then that sense of other continues to grow and develop so that we bring that same commitment, that same love, that same understanding of that third. I cannot be well if you are not well. I cannot be happy if you are not happy. And we begin to cultivate a deep felt sense of love, care, through the reality of interconnectedness. And then come to recognize that there is no other. And this very knowing is the first capacity of this trilogy of these three gems. We recognize our own Buddha nature, our own essential goodness, our own capacity for clear seeing, for love beyond tribe and preference. And we see that it is good. And we see that it is not simply ours, but that the same capacity exists in all sentient beings. And so that same capacity for care, for regard, for love, for compassion belongs not only to those we know, but by our shared humanity. By the reality that it too exists in that perceived other, we care for them. The first of the three jewels, our basic goodness, our Buddha nature. Our capacity for awakening. And then the second gem or jewel is the truth, the Dharma. And our capacity for clear seeing, for knowing it, and for then living in accord with the truth, not our preference, not our own bias, not our limited view or our limited interest in just providing for ourselves, but all beings. Reflecting on the second jewel of the Dharma. And committing oneself then wholeheartedly to its pursuit, to its achievement. And then the third refuge is also known as a refuge, an essential truth that will provide protection, clarity. compassion and wisdom. That third jewel is the Sangha itself. Understanding that without each other, in communion and community, we cannot survive. We cannot grow, heal, learn, or love. And so the refuge of the Sangha becomes very important to the achievement of all three of these refuge. And so we rest in the triple gems. We rest in the three refuge. And find ease and well-being. It is understood that on these three you can rely. On these three you will be protected. On these three you can unconditionally count. And so this is where maybe the distinction between religion, where you take this on as a belief, versus commitment. The three refuge are vows, actually, that are taken. One's commitment to one's own cultivation of awareness, presence, clear seeing, and one's capacity for that. One's pursuit of then the dharmas, and our commitment to seeing clearly to the benefit of the Sangha for all beings. And from this, then, we know it is from here that we will all be happy. We will all be free from distress and affliction. We will all be grateful and joyful for our own capacities and also the capacities of others. And we will need them and use them and be grateful for them. And in these three, we can then rest in equanimity. Until all beings have realized this happiness and this freedom. And may our practice today contribute and may it continue until all beings are awakened and free. And then expanding your awareness beyond the body, beyond the breath, beyond the instructions to include hearing, seeing, check into the body, seeing what's needed here. So I'll just take a moment and check in. See what else came up for you as you were contemplating that number 3. And then what does it mean for you as we look at some of what the number 3 represents within these traditions? There's a couple other 3s. We'll talk about them too. Any thoughts about this?
As we started to, just before we started to sit, the one thing that came up for me, and you actually mentioned it as we were sitting, is that I remember when I first started sitting, I didn't know what the bowing was. And then at some point you had talked about awakened heart, mind, truth of the Sangha, truth of the moment, and support of the Sangha. And so that was the first thing, was like, okay, I do that every time because you have expressed that. And in your discussion, you basically touched on that, but that's what came up for me right away.
Yes, that's right. Remember, Cindy, when we did for fun, really, right? Because it isn't really in our everyday practice, but we did the bowing, heart, right, speech and mind, body and mind of the large bow that's often done and was done in the tradition as well. That's that essential 3. And Cindy, you're one of the people, I think, as I'm recollecting, that actually took the refuge vows.
Yes.
And you were able to take them. I think this is so important. You were able to take them even with another root tradition, right? Because you have another set of beliefs and practices, and right, you have a whole other tradition that you have been learned in and exposed to. And yet this is that concept of universality, that this does not diminish any of our other practices, does it? Any of our other beliefs. It doesn't come into conflict. You can be Christian or Jewish or right, Sufi, or really anything. It is simply, we like to think of it as a magnifier of the truth of our original root traditions, which almost all of us have had, right? And so these vows are not inconsistent. You could say then, these 3 are not inconsistent with life, right? And this is that taking it outside of this idea of religion or outside of the idea of a belief system in any way. It's saying this is really only here as a support for life. Other thoughts?
One of the ways I think about it is just in like the practical sense, like you need that 3rd for balance. And so I always try to have 3s around me, like in all things, just to keep that balance.
Yes, it's true, isn't it? Think about it. Think about a two-legged stool. Really just start there, right? And the challenge of that in terms of real balance, right? That somehow that tripod idea just gives us that extra support. And we know in design, anybody who's in design knows that you never just have two of something in the mix, right? That the three itself, interestingly, offers a sort of symmetry, one could say. Balance, I love that word too. I'm looking at Siobhan because, right, I know you do this, and these ideas of where balance, symmetry exist are better offered in this trilogy, in this tripod. Siobhan, do you want to say anything about that?
Were you talking to me?
I was saying that you have studied and practiced this idea of symmetry and balance in some of the work you do, maybe even particularly in the Feng Shui, right? That we're always looking for that. What adds and doesn't, right? Adds to space or even adds to energy and doesn't detract or take away. And Lynn was saying that for her, 3 has come to represent balance.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the reason I didn't hear you is because Steve was starting the car outside, and my phone automatically hooks up to the Bluetooth, and I'm like, I heard my name and then everything disappeared. So,
well, that was a brief summary.
So yeah, I mean, in Feng Shui, it's balance and harmony is, what we try and bring into a space, and that has a lot of variables, based on a person's unique personality, etc. But it's interesting that 3 does come up as far as arrangement, arranging.
Yes. Yeah. Often. And actually, I know as I'm saying this, I just looked at the condo we're in Arizona. We're getting ready to leave for home today. And there are 3 little cactus pots sitting on the table here in front of me. And I think if we looked for where we would see 3, number 1, then that would be an interesting practice, wouldn't it? Where do you see this 3s arising? And then I'd say there's another practice in it, which is where can you open to include 3? Would be a second piece, which is where do we contract, right? Right. This idea of pulling back into familiar, let's say, or pulling back into only what is known, or, devolving. I'm thinking a certain, that there is something immediately expanded in the 3 that is actually, even when it is intense and passionate and loving, and in the 2, that there really is something different in it. And so the 3 representing quite a bit in the particularly the Buddhist tradition, but we've already named not only in any way at all. That's number 1. And then number 2, I'd like us to look for 3s. Let's make that a practice. Look for all of the places. And really, it only isn't in the looking. I'd like you to then stop and see, what would it mean if it were 2? Right? What would that very felt sense? I'm looking at these 3 cactus and I'm thinking, what would it be like if they were 2? By the way, it would not be unpleasant. Right. If there were just 2 sitting on the table here, they would not be unpleasant, but it's not quite the same. And then take a moment and reflect on what that is. Would the two be offensive in any way or unpleasant? Of course it would not, but it also wouldn't be the same. And that there is a certain energy of three that I would like you to consider. Right? A certain energy of three. Any thoughts about that?
You know, when you mention feng shui, I often have my clients feel for themselves, feel the felt sense. How does it feel with these two pictures or these two objects on the table? What do you feel in your body? Now we add a third object or painting or pillow. What do you feel? I'm always asking my clients, what's the felt sense do you feel?
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes. There's a reason, isn't
Yeah.
there? I'm not going to say that three is always better. That's not what
No.
I'm saying. So I don't want to, don't go around your house now going, wait a minute, I only have two lights there. Do I need a third? This is not really.
right.
Yeah.
Well, no, actually, what I meant was no matter what you're doing, what is the felt sense? Because it may
That's
not
right.
be three. It may be one, it may be two,
That's
it
right.
may be not, it may be none.
That's
I don't
right.
know.
That's right. You did not, I did not get that idea from
Yeah.
you at all, Siobhan. I want us to be careful because we can fall into these ideas, right, of black and whites or better or worse, and really, I love what you're saying because it's so true. There is a felt sense, and I'd like us to just make contact with it and imagine what it would be like with three, and also imagine what it would be like without three, and how would that feel? And that would be a really interesting inquiry into this idea of threes and thirds and why, really across tradition, I must say, across traditions, the number three has come to represent something fairly significant. And then I'd like you to really just recollect, if you would, as Cindy was saying, if you would recollect what these three are representing very specifically, not just the universal three, what's that sense, what's that energy, what's that, but then these three, and these three being our capacity for awakening. Number one, our capacity to awaken to the truth, to the benefit of all beings. And that to do so, we must, it's not seen as an option, be engaged, embodied with others. That it is not a choice. You cannot practice in the cave alone and hope to realize this awakening potential. And that we must understand that because it is simply not the clear seeing, is it? It's the actions we then take in behalf of ourselves and others with and in that clear seeing, right? As brilliant as we are, if we do not act in behalf of not only ourselves, but others, then what, right? And so that trilogy, and as you call it to mind then, what I'd like you to do is see if you can't rest for just a few breaths, maybe 3 breaths in it. Maybe 3 breaths, calling to mind the capacity of our own Buddha nature, calling to mind the truth of the Dharma and its benefits, and calling to mind all those for whom we practice. How does that sound? It'll be a fun inquiry, wouldn't it? I think it'd be well worth our investment of time. And so let's take it on. Chris said, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Another trilogy, another third. Dennis said, the sink, the stove, and the refrigerator. How practical and also completely true, right? With these things, we can not only survive, but thrive. The third eye, Dennis said. Another aspect of the threes and thirds. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. I'm going to include below, before we get ready to sign off, I'm going to include the link for the all day that is coming up this Saturday. So if you have not signed up, we still have some room. There it is for you. I believe it is Greg who will be on Zoom this Saturday. So there will be Zoom, even though we're also doing the all day. I believe that Carrie is sending out the notices for how to get to Pete's Geodome for those who will be joining us. Remember, there's a half-day option, both in AM or PM. If you can do one of those, you don't have to be there the whole day if that doesn't work for you. And then Siobhan wrote, in the Hindu tradition, it's called truth, beauty, goodness. Lovely. Satyam Shivam Sundaram. Yes, beautiful. That's exactly right. In every tradition, really, I think bar none, the concept of the threes and what that three represents. And I tried to bring a little sense of that three and that felt sense of opening one's heart beyond attachment, right? Beyond just mine, beyond just my beloved, to include that idea of all beings. So I'm going to sign off now, get ready to drive home back to San Diego. We had a great time here in Tempe, Arizona. It was actually much more delightful than I expected. I haven't been to Tempe in a long time. Wasn't particularly excited to be here. It was actually quite lovely. Great weather, was very moderate, very springy and wonderful. I know we had some rain there in San Diego. And I am still looking forward to being home with you all. So let's join our hands for a moment. We'll call to mind and recollect once again the three. What are these three? They are first our own capacity for love, for kindness, for compassion, for wisdom, and equanimity. And the second is the Dharma, the truth of the way, the truth of our capacities, the truth that they are the path to true happiness and freedom. And then the third is the Sangha, the community in which we sit and breathe and live and be and are supported. And it is understood that without these three, true awakening, true freedom, true abiding happiness cannot be ours. And then may we bow to these three. Thank you all so much. Good to see you all. I look forward to seeing those of you who can join us Saturday on Zoom or in at the Geodome. I look forward to our time together there. Greg will be on this Thursday as well at 7 a.m. So I hope to see some of you there. And then we'll be right back in the saddle next Tuesday to talk about, well, some other number. I don't know which one quite yet, but I look forward to sharing it with you.
What's the morning time in the Geodome?
The morning time is 9 o'clock, Dennis. So people will actually have time if they want to sit at 7:30 and then head out probably around 8:15, 8:30 to get there. It's pretty close, right off of Elfin Forest Road. Shouldn't be too hard for everybody to get to.
So 7:30?
7:30 will be on Zoom. 9 o'clock will be when we start in the dome. All right, everyone, be well.
Safe travels, Diana.
Thank you. Thank you very much.